Hi, Sherry. How are you?
In the last 20 seconds.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I think we're all set. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so excited to moderate. My name is Jenny Rowe. I'm a CEO of Curious Reactor, and I have been co-hosting with Vineet since the pandemic started on Tuesday Cocktail Hour, which turned to the Hub Cure series that we've been producing as a newsletter. So today I'm so excited to actually cover Bea Dalton and Dr. Sherry Yu, because they have been featured in our newsletter before, and now we get to actually talk about the outcome of the impact of their work. So if you were to think about 4 or 5 months ago, if you remember, like all we heard about was the shortage of PPE and the lack of supply of ventilators. And thanks to work from group that Bea and Sherry have been involved in, they are the reason that we don't hear about those as much as other problems. So I will just kick started and let Dr. Sherry Yu and Bea introduce themselves and talk about, what group that they have been involved in, juggling their day job as well as those volunteer work, and what they have accomplished. Sherry, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Yu. I am a Mohs Fellow at Yale now, but through the early days of the pandemic was a dermatology resident at Harvard, and then during the day was also a DeLand Fellow in Hospital Administration at Brigham and Women's. And so that created a really nice opportunity for me to be the PPE Innovation and Conservation Lead for the Incident Command structure at the hospital. And that also allowed me to have a lot of insight into the supply chain issues that we were experiencing as a hospital. And so with several others, I co-created a group called the Greater Boston Pandemic Fabrication Team, or PanFab. And we were a very large group of makers, engineers, medical students, postdocs, and physicians and others who sought to innovate and create things that could help hospital systems. And our priority list was really driven by the needs of the Brigham at the time. So very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I'm Bea, short for Beatrix. I am a member of SmithVent, which was a team of about 30 Smith College Picker Engineering Program alumni, faculty, and friends who were designing an open source ventilator. I graduated from Smith with a degree in engineering, but now I'm working in the Senate, so not really engineering. And it was nice to go back to my engineering roots during this project. We started with no knowledge of ventilators. It was a group of volunteers who all signed up. We actually learned about it. One of our professors, Susanna Howe, saw something about SmithVent in the Hub Cures newsletter itself, and she emailed out to our program. So it's nice that it's all come full circle now. But we joined, we did a lot of research, and we entered the COVID-19 challenge. That was actually what started our whole journey. And on July 1st of this year, we were announced the winners of the challenge, which means that we both designed a ventilator and then prototyped one to a degree where they felt that it could be carried forward. So the next steps for us are going through a gap analysis on the ventilator that we designed, and then hopefully it will be implemented in, I think they're looking at Africa and emerging markets and working with local developers there to actually build it. So I'm also very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so that story was just so captivating. So for those of you who doesn't know the CoVent story, as you can imagine, there were usual suspects in that challenge like NASA and SpaceX, and among all odds, SmithVent won. So that was announced in July 1st, and I was so excited for it. So I really want to kind of touch upon, so there were a lot of kind of volunteer groups early on in pandemic trying to bring about our skill set in some way to impact the crisis. And I would say that a lot of people who have been, well-established and senior who are known for their innovation have also contributed, but there's also these new people like Sherry and Bea came out and really made a huge impact. So I would love to learn about the motivation behind why you went on to those volunteering. First, Bea, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, I can speak for myself personally and a little bit for our team. So on a personal level, I just didn't know how to give back. I was very lucky in that I'm still employed, I'm still able to have a job, and I can work from home. But I wanted to do something more and I didn't know what. And so when I got an email that was like, "Are you interested in designing a ventilator?" I was like, "I can try. There's nothing stopping me." And so I joined, and I don't think I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, but I have learned so much. I think Sherry will get a kick out of this, but when we started this project, I was searching just like, what is a ventilator? And I started watching a video, and then I was like, wait a moment, I need to go back to the basics. So I was like, how does the respiratory system work? And so I really started from the ground up in this project. And I think most of my team members had similar experiences where this is not our background, but we have some sort of engineering skill and we could use it. And we had some incredible project management, which is really, I think, what helped us win with Susanna and then one of our other co-leaders, Astrid Landau. The two of them together really kept us on track, moving forward and innovating, but also doing real work and not just letting our crazy ideas get ahead of ourselves. So we just wanted to give back however we could.
Amazing. Sherry?
I think I was in a relatively unique position because my day role as the DeLand Fellow leading the PPE innovation and conservation work was really drove kind of the need for a volunteer network of experts, because I don't have any engineering or maker background. And so while I had a pretty good sense of what hospitals were going to need in terms of PPE, I had very little knowledge of how to make it, where I would even source it from, material compatibility. And so really depended on one of my attendings, Dr. Nicole LaBeouf, who's also at the Brigham, introducing me to some folks where we were able to create kind of a large group. And I think, like Bea, many people had a lot of creative energy and a desire to help and didn't exactly know how or have an outlet for that. And so that's why PanFab became a really nice community where it was both kind of hospital-led priorities, but each leader of different projects was based purely on interest and less on seniority. It was really great.
Great. So Bea touch upon a little bit on when she speak about the project management. So I would say that I have been involved in a lot of volunteer work, also for the pandemic, and just getting together right-hearted people sometimes could be, you need to have structured. Otherwise, it could be really difficult because you have never met them before. You have no working relationship. You don't have a chemistry. So it's very challenging and it could be more counterproductive than the other. So I think the success behind what you guys were able to achieve really was hinged upon that teamwork and project management. So please share us, the secret sauce behind it. I know that Bea's group is actually publishing this, so I'll let Sherry go first.
Sure. So I think, like Bea, PanFab had this incredible project management. So Dr. Peter Sorger is the principal investigator, and he had a lab manager, Helen, and one of his medical students, Deb, who he kind of recruited to help project manage. And so we were able to create upwards of 10 work streams in different projects. And the initial one was kind of the Brigham's Bee Protected COVID testing booth, which is kind of the three-walled box that you see with gloves sticking out of it that helps save PPE. But we made other things because we had such great organization and so much creative energy, I think. And so everything now is online and open source, but we've made things like 3D printed mask frames to help improve N95 fit as hospitals have to transition through different models. And we did a lot of work initially on hydrogen peroxide and sterilization of PPE. And so it's been an incredible opportunity to collaborate in ways that I think traditionally hospitals haven't been able to do.
I just wanted to share, this is Sherry with her animation, if you haven't seen this in Twitter. But yeah, Bea, let's talk about how SmithVent been able to manage this project. And you guys are actually all over different places in different country and different states. So
yeah, we're primarily in the United States, but we're spread out from coast to coast, from California up to Maine. And then we have some people in Canada, in Germany. One of our group members was in the Netherlands for a bit of time. So we're all over the place. We came from, I guess there's two things. One is we all graduated from Smith or have some connection to Smith. So we had that tie to ground us when we started, which was really helpful. But we were all from different class years, and so that we didn't know each other when we were at school. But coming into this project, we had Susanna and Astrid who signed up from the very beginning to be our project managers. And so what they did was we took an agile approach where we developed these 5-day sprints. And at the beginning and end of each sprint, we had a meeting where the beginning, we set the goals and priorities for the sprint. And at the end, we would recap. And then the next day, we'd start the next sprint immediately. And having that rapid time frame kept us accountable because it meant we couldn't just stop doing something. It was going to be due in a couple of days. So someone was going to have to do it regardless. And with that, we also, because we knew we were on such a tight time frame with the challenge, we had this constrained innovation where we had all these crazy ideas, but then we had to pull them back and we said, nope, we just have to stop and move forward with this one. And that was more of a blessing than a curse because it meant we actually did stop and dive deep into a design instead of just designing and designing and designing, which is very possible when you don't have a set end to what you're doing. So I don't think without having that sort of overarching structure, it would not have worked. But I think one of the other really cool things is as we mentioned, we're all over the place. So we did this almost entirely remotely. Our entire designing was based on like our Zoom conferences with each other, how many Google slide decks can we make, things like that. And then when we wanted to build it, we got lucky in that Smith allowed us to use the space. So we did have one central place where we could build it, but only 4 people could go. So still, we were all on Zoom watching the few people in the lab. There's one video that I'm not sure if it's posted online yet, but I'm sure we'll make it out, where Professor Howe, Susanna, is in the lab and she's soldering these electronics and has the iPad propped up on her knees because on Zoom is our actual electronics person who's walking her through all of the steps that she has to do. And just watching that, it really astounded me like how incredible it is that we can all be a part and yet still bring this project together.
You know, that gives me an image of like, you know, somebody breaking the bank and you have to like cut the security line and you're getting talked through by whoever's the expert at this. That's really cool. Another thing that I want to bring about, and I think this is a common denominator between both of your group, was decision-making process was very efficient because who the leaders were and people were able to actually follow it. And I think that's sometimes really difficult in a volunteer where the hierarchy of the organization may be a little bit loose. So could you talk a little bit about that? Whichever.
Sure, Bea, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can go first. I think one thing that really helped our team is that none of us were ventilator design experts. So nobody could come in saying, this is my field, you have to listen to me. We all were in the same boat of just trying to learn as we went. And that really helped us because we had that naturalness of no one was trying to step in charge. And I think the other thing is we did start the project knowing that Susanna and Astrid were our project managers. Over time, that merged into a whole project management team. But we knew that we had dedicated people we could ask questions of, but we also knew that those people were only like that because we chose for them to do that. We didn't say, like, they didn't come in that position. And so it was a very accessible relationship where if you had a question, you could ask it because you knew that no one was going to think like, oh, that's a silly question. Like there was none of that. And I think that was what worked best for us.
Right.
I mean, I think my experience was very similar to Bea's. You know, I'm a dermatologist by training, but have no background in supply chain management, how we maintain supplies in a hospital, where ordering takes place. And so in a very similar way, we had kind of niche experts that we were able to ask along the way. And then I also think that our priorities were driven by hospital need. And so that made it very clear what we wanted to focus on. We often focused on kind of low-hanging fruit and what was possible in a quick turnaround time in terms of prototyping. And then so our initial models were often slightly more expensive than subsequent models where we started to focus on flat packable designs or things that were accessible to lower resource areas. And so I think we kind of had a very clear hierarchy of what we needed to accomplish. And everybody, for once, I think, was laser focused on one thing, which was maintaining supplies for our hospital system during a pandemic.
I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that for anybody actually working in remote. Now we have to kind of get used to the new normal as well as any other volunteer organization. So thanks for sharing that. So I want to talk a little bit about you have your day job. So Bea's working in Senator's office, and Sherry's actually is working. She had carved out this time. She's in the hospital right now. So none of the work that you have done during the volunteer actually is part of your job, day job. So tell me a little bit about what you're getting out of this volunteer experience and how it's going to change your future and outlook.
Yeah, I can go first if you want, Sherry.
Sure.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I have a background in engineering, but I am not doing any engineering work in my job right now. And having this was a nice way for me to remember what it was that I did before, but that also I learned a whole gambit of skills that I can bring back to my job now. Some of them are definitely more technical, like no one who's coming to talk with our senator is gonna care about how exactly ventilators work, but they do care about the motivations behind why we formed as a team to do this. How can solving this problem of ventilator shortage in the US apply to other countries, or can it be done in other states, or that kind of crossover? And I think actually, I saw there was a question in the chat. I think this ties in well with that, is that I am going to take the skills and the knowledge that I've learned, and I'm going to use them when I move forward, in that everything is interconnected. And I think Sherry probably discovered this as well, working with supply chains. But maybe we're building this as an engineering project, but it touches healthcare professionals, it touches the patients, it touches every different aspect of society and life imaginable. And so nothing that you do, you're doing independently. You have to think of all the different like ramifications and potential people that you'll need to work with in doing whatever. And so I think having that sort of broader perspective for this one small project will help me be able to apply that same kind of thinking to whatever other project or challenge I take on.
That's great. Sherry.
I think that my experience is very similar to Bea's as well. I also think, I have an interest in hospital administration, and in my day job as the Mohs Fellow, I help patients on an individual level, or kind of like a microeconomic or a micro scale, on a person by person basis. And this opportunity during the pandemic, even though it's awful, presented an amazing experience for me to see how I could impact safety for many, many people on a wider scale. And it also taught me a lot about kind of the checks and balances that you need as you try to implement hospital policies, both for kind of what you think is required or necessary to keep people safe, but also kind of the opinions that you need to take into consideration based on what frontline workers are actually experiencing in the field. And so that has been a really interesting and fascinating learning experience for me. I also think it highlighted the need for collaboration. Traditionally, supply chain management has really been in the realm of materials management. And I think amazingly, we haven't had any product shortages for the most part until now. And so people really ordered on a 24-hour or 48-hour turnaround time, and just had kind of just-in-time ordering in place, which clearly, because of the pandemic, showed some weaknesses in our system. And we can't really just order 1 or 2 days on hand, and we really need to think consciously about where we're going to store things, how we're going to utilize products in the future to minimize waste, but also keep people safe.
That's great. This is my last question, and if any of you in the audience have questions, you can add it now. But my questions to Bea is that, so Smith College is, known for being an all-woman college, and engineering, it particularly has been, low attendance on women, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about what you think of the women in engineering. And I know you mentioned a little bit about what you learned, and the educational program that you had in Smith really kind of prepared you well for this ventilator challenge. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Smith Engineering Program, I would just like to disclaim, we are the first, no longer the only all-women's or historically all-women's college to have their own engineering program, which is very exciting. But the way that Smith structures engineering is that it is not one specific degree, so it's not a mechanical or an electrical degree, but it's engineering sciences. So you take core electives all over the discipline of engineering, and then you can focus on whatever your interest area is. My interests are all over the place if you haven't already gathered. So part of it was in AI, but then part of it was in civil and environmental, which is what I did my capstone project on. So really still all over the place. But that prepared me especially well for this project because I wasn't siloed into one specific discipline of engineering. I was able to learn from a bunch of different pieces and bring those together. And I think I had that experience, and so did all of the other engineers who came out of Smith's engineering program. And so even though we all had this same base, we took different electives, and our people are working in different professions. So we have some people who are in engineering industry, in aerospace or other areas, other people who are teaching. And so having all these different people with different backgrounds let us really come into a project where we didn't have any experience, but didn't let that stop us, because it just meant that we all knew different pieces that we could bring together. And I think that's probably pretty similar to Sherry, where you had everyone, and some people had expertise, and when you needed their expertise, they had it, or you went out and found it, but you didn't constrain yourself because you didn't already have that expertise when you started. And I think Smith did a very good job of that, also just in the fact that we are still a liberal arts college. So you're getting an engineering degree that is technical in nature, but you are required to take non-technical classes as well. So you get the full breadth of your education. If you have a daughter or someone else young in your life who's thinking about being a woman engineer, I think Smith was a great place to go to school for engineering. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Great. I think that's, it really resonates with me. I mean, there's a lot of emphasis these days on, not to become a specialist, but generalist. And what's really more important is being the ability to acquire the subject matter knowledge when you're asked to it. So rather than having that from the get-go. So that's really, that really resonates with me. For Sherry, my question to you is that, so hospital, let's say hospital plays a really important role in innovation, yet the hospital providers, the healthcare providers hasn't been part of this, doctors are not the ones that if I were to walk into a nightly innovation networking meeting that I will be, seeing or something. You guys are extremely busy, but at the same time, there's a huge value to providers being really engaged with the innovation community. So tell us a little bit about how this will impact the longitudinal impact that have on healthcare providers being involved in innovation in general.
I mean, I think you make a really good point. Traditionally, when we went to medical school and did our training, our focus was, patient-centered care, acquiring lots of basic science knowledge or translational knowledge to apply in the clinic. And I think that you see hospitals starting to shift their focus. And so places like the Brigham have an innovation hub. And so hospitals are slowly trying to encourage their providers and other employees to really take novel ideas and pursue them. And I also think that during COVID, you saw for the first time that Partners, or Mass General Brigham, as it's now called, created a Center for COVID Innovation. And so really highlighted the need to not only take traditional approaches to solving problems, but to bring together members of the community that were disparate, spread out across the country, and clearly didn't know each other, and really collaborate together to make sure that we were able to take care of folks. That's really, right. I think, been key.
Yeah. I think a lot of the hospitals now are thinking about rethinking the supply chain, right? And actually creating and meeting that demand in-house. So I think as that come along, I think what you've learned and demonstrated in PanFab and both in Brigham will be really important.
I also think for the first time, you're seeing product shortages that are long lasting and undulating. So every time you think you've identified a new pair of gloves that meets all the requirements that you like, you have that, and you feel that the supply chain is quite stable. And then 3 weeks later, it turns out the raw materials are in short supply, and you need to kind of iterate. And so I think this rapid iteration process of identifying kind of the next best alternative, and even potentially looking backwards to see if your first product is available again, is a new way of thinking for hospitals, and also kind of breeds the need for innovation.
Right. All right. So that was the content that I prepared for 30 minutes, and I promise that Bea and Sherry will have some time to speak to some of the attendees. So Thank you for being here and telling us the story. So let's go back to the networking table. Thank you.